Hello and welcome back. And today I'm going to be painting this blue mountain landscape. I've got a simple drawing here, as you can see, a yellow watercolor pencil. Made sure I got the horizon lines straight, and then some simple lines to mark out the mountains. Now I've got my paper on a piece of MDF board. I'm wetting it with a nice big, soft, wide brush. I think that's 3 inches wide. Now turning my drawing over, my paper over, and wetting the back of my paper. This is a 350 GSM weight paper, so it's reasonably thick. It's a sea white, it's not a cotton paper, so it must be cellulose. There's my drawing. Place it onto the board, and the wet back of the paper and the wet board, and they should stick together. And I am flattening painting now, quite softly there. I don't want my yellow pencil marks to be erased by too much water. But it seems fairly resistant, so that's okay. So I'm just wetting the whole of the paper on the front, and then I'm wiping off softly with a tissue the middle section. Mostly the middle section. Now I'm painting some yellow, no, not yellow, some raw sienna. Raw sienna. Yellow ochre is very similar, into the sky area. So I'm using a soft brush again. This is a 1-inch soft brush. It's not a harky brush or a hake brush, as some people call them. It's not an official harky brush. It's just a very soft bristle brush. And I'm using it to get a nice diffuse sky. Now I'm pressing and blotting out all the paint that's on the mountains. So the paper is obviously still wet. The back of the paper is wet. The board's wet. And the mountains are wet. So it's all not had a chance to dry, so I'm able to blot it out quite effectively. Now, this might not happen if you do this at home. It depends on your paper as much as anything. This sea white paper is really good for lifting out like this. Okay, I decided I wanted to a little bit of that light in the foreground. This is a lake in the foreground. So obviously it would catch some of the light from the sky. So again, I'm using the 1-inch brush. Soft strokes across the bottom of the paper, and now dry the whole thing. Here's my second colour. It's indigo, and I've diluted it down. That's a little test card show. I'm painting the distant mountains. Now originally I had 2 or 3 mountains drawn in the distance, which you can see from the lines, but I decided to simplify it to just one in the end. I'm painting quite carefully up to the line, up to my yellow watercolor pencil line. And this is why I dried it quite thoroughly, because if the sky was wet and I was painting this mountain, it would bleed up into the sky. So your paper has to be nice and dry before you go onto this stage. And the paint is thin, i.e. the colour water, and it's diluted. So we get a nice soft, low value or light coloured blue for the distant mountains. This is a mop brush. It's similar to a round brush, but it holds much more water. So every time I load the brush, I can paint a lot of the paper without having to reload, i.e. put more paint on. And I find this kind of painting relaxing and also more effective. I think the more times you paint across the paper, the more chance you've got of leaving brushstrokes behind, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But on a painting like this, where you're trying to get a nice, smooth, serene finish, the fewer brushstrokes that can be seen at the end, the better, in my view. So yeah, it's a mop brush and it holds a lot of water. If you don't have a mop brush, use a round brush, but do try and use the biggest brush you can. This is an A4 piece of paper, which is about 12 by 9 inch. And this is quite a small mop brush. If you're using a round brush, I'd say use a size 12 or a 16. So you want a fairly large brush, even though it's relatively small paper, just so that you can get these nice, big, broad strokes onto your paper. So I'm painting an area of a reflection, and the object that's reflected is not actually on the painting yet, so it doesn't look the same, but it will do eventually. And now I'm trying to roughly mirror the shape of the mountain in the distance. Let's try all that again. I know you can see that the paper is starting to lift off the board, but I don't want to re-wet the back at this stage, so I'm just going to carry on and hope it doesn't curl up too much. I don't really like using tape, in case you're wondering why I'm doing this system. So now I've got a slightly stronger or darker value of the blue. It's still the indigo, and I'm painting in the middle distance mountains. This one is actually nearer to the view, but I'll be going over that one later. Here's the main mountain in the background. You have to be a little bit careful here, and notice that I am still using this medium-sized mop brush. Now, if you're a beginner and you're not confident of your brush skills doing small details like this, then switch to a smaller brush. Do the edges as quickly and as carefully as you can, and then switch back to a larger brush when you paint in the middle section like here. So I'm following the line of the hill reasonably carefully. It doesn't have to be exactly the same, obviously it's a hill and all hills are different. So now let's just fill in that big block of mountain. Don't have to be careful here because I've already painted all the edges. So when I'm painting the bigger area, I try to get it on with as few strokes as possible, as I've already said. And I'm painting with quite a light touch. The paper's wet and the paint is wet. So just lightly touch your brush to the paper and the paint flows out of the brush. I'm tidying up the little tide mark that I've got there. Okay, now I'm strengthening the value of the mountain on this left side. You can see over on the right there's some light from the setting sun or maybe the rising sun. So the mountain side over on the left being more shadow, so I'm strengthening the value of that. I'm making it darker. And I'm also preparing the way for this hill here, which you probably can't see now. And again, I'm just tidying up that line. Now I've grabbed hold of my board and I'm tipping the board with the painting on to let the pigment, the darker pigment, flow down paper a little bit. So you've got some control over where your pigment will flow into if you tip your paper to the side, up and down layers. And we'll dry all that off. Now, you don't have to dry these things. You don't have to dry your painting if you don't want. You can just wait for it to dry naturally. So here's the foreground hill, the nearest to the distant shore. And again, it's repeating the same process. So I've got a slightly darker value again. So I've got 3 values of the blue in play. A very light blue for the distant hill, and then a medium blue or the peak, and then a darker blue for the hill in front of the pointy mountain. And these layers, paler in the distance and getting darker, deeper into the foreground, help to convey a sense of depth. So now I am painting the objects which are reflected in the water. And I say objects, the treated hill with trees. Still using the mop brush all the way through, almost all the way through. So as you can see, I can get quite fine detail, even though it's such a big brush. It's very wet, there's a lot of paint and a lot of water in there. Takes a little bit of getting used to using one of these brushes, but when you do, they're great because you can load them up once and then paint for a long time before you have to reload. So here I'm actually painting very, very small details, some little dots and dashes. As you probably guessed, these are trees. I'm painting the foliage of the trees, little dots, dashes, kind of inspired by Chinese painting style. Maybe it's the colours as well. Let's determine that. So a couple of lines, vertical lines to represent tree trunks, and some foliage on this side as well to balance out this foreground hill, foreground island, this little island in the lake. So now I'm just drying the island off. Now I've got a ruler and I've got a nylon, a flat nylon brush. I'll show you this in more detail a little bit later, but I'm basically painting in some reflection lines or lines of light. The way you do this is you put your ruler across your paper, you get a damp, stiff nylon brush. It's one of the brushes I use for acrylics. You can see it better here. And you run it along your ruler 2 or 3 times and then you blot it out with some clean tissue to give you a nice straight line, a highlight line in your water. Now I'm doing it more freehand, so I'm painting the lines with a freehand rather than a ruler. Blot them out with a tissue, and you get some highlighted lines. And obviously these are meant to be ripples in the water. And as you pull it across, you can see that you pull some of the blue into the light area to give the illusion of some ripples in the water. Now you have to have a very light touch here. I'm repeating it across this side as well. I'm not doing it too much because I've decided that I need to strengthen the value of the lake and the hill on this left hand side. So concentrate on the right hand side to start with. So the blue that lifts out the dark area is transferred onto the light area. I'm not painting, I'm just using a damp brush there. Now I'm back to painting a very dark area in the foreground. Indigo again, all the way through. It's just indigo and rosy in it. And I'm painting in my foreground. So this is the foreground shore, and the water is lapping up against the foreground. So it's not even, it's not an even curve. There's a little bit of variation in the form to make it interesting. I could have gone with an even curve. I'm trying my brush here, and I'm splaying out the bristles. So as you can see, it's pretty dry at this point. And I'm going to use it a bit like a fan brush. Don't know if you've ever used a fan brush. And if I just tap it and push it up a little tiny bit, the paint from the foreground is transferred up and over the edge of the lake, and you get these little grassy effects. Could have used a rigger brush, could have used a cocktail stick, which I've used in the past, or a fan brush, or even a very small round brush. But this tapping with my splayed out mop brush gives me some nice little marks, nice little textures of grass. Now I'm just repeating or reinforcing the dark in the foreground. Now, I let all that dry, and I came back to it, and I thought, that hill on the left and the lake needs to be strengthened. So all that work that I put in, which is why I kind of skipped over it in the video, all that work that I put in those reflection lines over on the left is now being painted over. But that's just the way it happens sometimes when you paint. You decide that you just have to cover something up that you've already done. So yeah, I'm strengthening the reflection in the water, and the hill itself is reflected. So it's a similar process to before, paint the edge and then block in the majority of it with some nice, quick, large, broad strokes. I've left a bit of white on the bottom there to give me a reflection line. It's not white, it's a pale blue. I'm fiddling a bit here, to be honest. It should all be done in one stroke if you can. No, I've got a damp flat brush. It's a soft brush. I'm running it along the edge of that reflection that I've painted in the water. I don't want it to be a harsh edge. So I want the edge of the actual hill to be sharp, but the edge in the water should be a bit softer. Here's that reflection process again. Lay a ruler across your painting. Use a firm nylon brush that's damp to draw lines, and then blot them out with some clean tissue. And you got 2 or 3 strokes should do it. Carefully lift up your ruler and blot it out. Make sure your tissue is clean. Get a nice line. Highlighted line. Now, I was struggling to get rid of the yellow watercolor pencil mat that I'd originally used for the drawing. So I am now using something a little bit more drastic, a sharp knife. This is actually tearing a layer off the top of the paper, but it does go back to a nice, bright white. Just obviously, you need to be careful doing this. I've seen people use a razor blade for this, which looks even more dangerous to me. So I'm doing one on the far distance as well, because that was a little bit too yellow. And there we go. Rub it away, and that's the painting finished. Hope you enjoyed that, and I will see you next time. Thank you for watching.